So many people have been speaking about the climate crisis. So many things have been put on paper, but the real question is, why is it that we're still not acting at the scale and speed that is necessary?
What we want to see at COP27 is moving pledges into implementation. Every stakeholder needs to step up and push forward.
The extreme weather events that the scientists have long connected to the climate crisis are becoming far more frequent and far more destructive.
The climate crisis is a threat multiplier, which means it exacerbates existing inequities in our society. The impacts are felt most deeply by Black, Indigenous, and communities of color.
We're living through an explosion of inequality. We need to remember we're on the same planet, and this is the planet that we need to make sustainable for the whole of humanity.
Climate change is impacting food security as well as political stability in many nations around the world. 5 years ago, there were 80 million people marching towards starvation. That number jumped to 135 million. What caused the jump? It was man-made conflict, like in Ukraine, compounded with climate shocks.
No one is as vulnerable to climate change as farmers are. If you talk transformation, the first thing they want to know is, what must I do on my farm?
This Sharm el-Sheikh COP is the moment to set up monitoring and accountability mechanisms and put money on the table to help developing countries to accelerate towards decarbonizing.
We know that this transition will require a fast adoption of a lot of new technologies. And the question today is how to find the appropriate way to finance this technology.
To put a number around it, it's an extra $2.5 to $3 trillion a year of additional finance that we have to find in order to get those emissions down.
Financial institutions have a lot of roles to play to bring the advice and provide the financing to make these transitions happen.
Younger generations are demanding a sense of purpose. They want to look at companies and say, I am investing with you all for this reason.
With 2 COPs taking place in Africa and the Middle East, we have this tremendous opportunity to put emerging markets at the forefront of our collective response to climate change.
International trade has to be part of the solution. How do we all get together to talk about a global carbon price that can guide us and help us to decarbonize the world?
The solutions are there. What we need is governments to regulate, to invest, and we need business to act with values.
History will look at us, people, politicians, corporate leaders. These times requires not only solutions, but speed.
There is nowhere else to look than the mirror. We are the ones that need to do this.
Hello and welcome to today's session on the power and participation of young people at COP27. My name is Natalie Pierce, and I am the head of the World Economic Forum's youth-based Global Shapers community. And today I'm joined by my co-host, Sophia Simmons. Sophia leads the Global Shapers Climate Action Initiatives. Hi, Sophia, how are ya?
Hey, Natalie. It is a pleasure to be able to lead this discussion with you today. It's a pleasure to be able to moderate because we have an incredible lineup of insightful and inspiring speakers, so I suggest we jump right in. As our viewers know, UN-led climate talks kicked off this week in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt, and today we'll hear from some of our participating members on the key role that youth, who represent more than half of the world's population, are playing in this year's conference.
According to the recent UNFCCC report, we are approaching 5 dangerous tipping points due to the current 1.1 degrees of global warming, which presents, of course, serious extinction risks for many species, us included. So in today's session, we want to get to the heart of the discussions taking place at COP27 and hear directly from youth delegates. Are world leaders doing enough to avert climate catastrophe? And how are they listening to the voices of the next generation, particularly those on the front lines of this crisis who are facing and feeling its worst effects?
Global Shapers represent 10,000 young innovators and activists under the age of 30 who are driving action to protect people and planet in 500 cities and 150 countries worldwide. Thanks to the support of a host of partners, most notably the Climate Reality Project, Global Shapers have implemented close to 500 projects to reduce emissions, respond to natural disasters, and preserve biodiversity, and of course, conserve nature. What we witness every day in our community is that young people are not giving up hope. Our members are taking local action, raising community awareness, and continuing to remind countries and companies of their duties to advance urgent climate action.
Sophia, you highlight the important role that young people play in advancing the climate agenda, and particularly the important role they play in this week's negotiation. Our members are joining forces in Egypt. They're bringing their local communities and perspectives along. They're speaking truth to power. They're liaising with key figures from across the UNFCCC process, and they are ensuring that diversity, equity, and justice are at the forefront of discussions. These are the principles at the heart of the Global Shapers community and the principles that young people are bringing to COP. So with this in mind, let us discover young people's stories of creativity, innovation, and resilience at COP27 as they fight for their future and the future of our planet. First, we'll play a short video to give viewers a preview of youth activities at COP27. Let's roll it. All right, you saw into the conference center, and now we are going to go live from the conference center. We are connected, so let's get started. Up first, we will be joined by 6 members of the Global Shapers community, and we are going to kick things off with Wool Hammond. He is a member of the Global Shapers Abuja Hub in Nigeria. Professionally, he's a sustainability expert and strategist, advising institutions on green transitions and ESG integration for positive impact. And he's also leading a green skilling program. Well, how are you today? I want to ask you, what's happening? What's your experience been like so far in Sharm el-Sheikh?
Hi Natalie, thank you for your question. It's been an eventful 5 days here in Egypt, seeing activities from the Blue Zone, the Green Zone, and the Innovation Zone. This is the 5th time COP is coming to Africa, and it's a great opportunity for African leaders and negotiators to table the interest of regions that are vulnerable to the problems and impact of climate change, as well as demand solution and urgent action by other world leaders to address this problem. I would also say seeing that it's an opportunity for not just Africa but other least developed regions of the world, Southeast Asia and small island states to come together, present their voices and see that we demand climate justice now and see equitable transition towards a green and sustainable future. It's also been interesting to see young people. We've not seen the type of walks and the protests we saw at COP26, but young people have sort of come together in small groups around the Blue Zone to keep demanding and holding our leaders accountable and demanding that this is the time to take action and see that we make COP27 happening here in Sharm el-Sheikh an implementation COP to deliver on the promises and agreements that we've had before. It's been a great experience, and we look forward that this COP will hold up to its promises and deliver on action that will protect the planet and bring just transition for the people so that we can live equitable and sustainable lives. Thank you, Natalie.
Thanks. Well, you mentioned some of the various zones. For those who won't have the chance to be in Egypt, what has been your favorite pavilion or favorite session so far?
Thank you. It's been, I would say, the Blue Zone, and something interesting has happened. For the first time in the history of COP, for over 27 sessions, for the first time we have a children and a youth pavilion. It's great to see. It's been great to see young voices, people speaking, sharing ideas, walking and speaking truth to power, amplifying voices. So the youth pavilion has really been an interesting place. I've spent a couple of had various engagements and spent a couple of time there, and it's been my favorite place. Another place that would also interest young people is the innovation zone, where we've seen innovators and entrepreneurs, as well as investors and private sector participants come together, sharing ideas on how we can use innovation and technology to address the climate problem. So for me, the children and youth pavilion, as well as the innovation zone, have been the biggest points for me.
Thanks. Well, it is so cool to see live in the conference zone, in the Blue Zone now. So we're so happy you're with us. I have a last question, and of course I have to ask, how are youth moving the needle on the climate action agenda at COP27? And particularly, how do you think global shapers are making a difference?
Thank you, Natalie. It's been great to see young people, not only from the civil society space or the business side of things, but also being part of country delegations, negotiating and being involved in the technical dialogue. So it shows that young people have the skills, the experience, and they have the leadership traits to take climate action. And the Global Shapers community has protecting the planet as one of its core impact areas. And I will tell you, Shapers have been doing a lot of amazing work on the ground in their various communities across the 500 plus hubs that we have. And I see the opportunity for us to keep demanding and speaking truth to power, holding our leaders accountable, ensuring that they take action. We don't want to see the talks anymore. We want to see action. And Global Shapers can keep pushing for that in our respective communities, and also mobilizing ourselves as a force of young people is one of our advantages. So I see the opportunity to keep mobilizing through advocacy, through policy support, through innovation and entrepreneurship to drive green growth in our communities and ensure that we have just transition. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Will, for tuning in and joining us. We are joined by 5 other global shapers as well. So we are going to keep rolling. It's pretty remarkable. We have over 90 young representatives from the global shapers community alone who are present in COP27 this week. So a huge delegation from the global shapers community. But of course, there are hundreds of young people who are influencing the negotiations in Egypt over, of course, this past week and next week as well. And so this session is really an opportunity to hear from them. Who is up next, Sophia?
Up next, we have Marie-Claire from the Zurich Hub. So I think it is important to note, as we heard from Wool, that it's not just youth that are participating as contributors to civil society, but as part of official delegations. So Marie-Claire, you were awarded by the UN Secretary General to be the Youth Climate Champion of Switzerland and elected to serve the youth constituency of the UNFCCC. I also know that you lead several associations and initiatives in climate action, sustainable development, youth women power, as well as the Climate Youth Negotiators Program. So very happy to have you with us. And I would like to ask you, who should we be paying attention to right now in the actual negotiations? Who are the key players?
Thank you so much, and welcome from the negotiations itself here in Egypt. You probably have heard some of the toughest negotiations are around loss and damage, financing loss and damage, adaptation, but also when it comes to how are we addressing the gender-related issues on climate or also education. So there are a lot of things on our agenda, especially because after we had the Paris Agreement, now we're moving into the implementation phase. How are we really bringing these frameworks and policies to the ground? And what my previous speaker just mentioned, how can also people like all of us actually work on the implementation that we actually have real climate action? And so these are the big topics, but I would like to address the question from a different angle, because for too long we have been seeing a lot of talks and we haven't been moving forward. And I think what is really, really crucial is that at this COP, as already mentioned, we have an absolutely groundbreaking number of young people spearheading these negotiations. And it's so important because we cannot have the same people trying to address the same questions and coming up with the same solutions which haven't worked for the last 30 years. That's why we need new blood kind of injecting into these negotiations. And that's why I'm really, really glad that we have been training with the Youth Negotiators Academy 60 young people, young individuals from all over the planet to actually be part of their delegations and really being at these decision-making tables and defining the future of our planet. And it has been really amazing to see how, these young people who have been trained together but also have building a community together are huddling in the negotiations, and then no matter what country they're coming from, they're actually drafting language, because as you might know, the UNFCCC negotiations are consensus based, meaning we need one language where every country needs to agree or at least not object. And this is only working if we really work together. And what young people bring in is this kind of passion, this strive, and speaking from the heart and lived experiences. And I'm really, really glad to see how this is changing now, and I really hope that through this injection of young people we can see more intergenerational leadership where it's kind of driven by passion and love instead of kind of how can we kick each other out and how can we have like these very tough negotiations, and how can we come together, because ultimately it's our future. And for us, 2030, 2050 or even 2100 are words where myself or at least my kids will be still alive, and it comes from a very different point, kind of having these time perspectives. And that's why I think it's very, very crucial that we have this momentum around young people and also global shapers in the space at the COP27.
Thank you so much for that answer. And I can also hear in you that passion and drive that is so present in your work. I am curious, would love to know, what do you think is missing, if anything is missing, from the UNFCCC agenda for COP27?
Well, countries have been fighting very hard to put loss and damage as an agenda item, and before the negotiations actually started, there were a lot of negotiations already happening to bring loss and damage on the agenda. And I'm very, very glad and happy that this actually happened, because several of the young people we have been training have been reporting how their islands are already suffering from loss and damage right now or actually in the past. And it's really important that this topic is on the agenda, and I really hope we can move forward with ambitious items. This is already there. And there is no standing alone item on young people, which I per se don't think is actually a bad thing, because I think young people are an intersection, right? We need to have the voices of young people in all the different items, and that's why it's so important to have them actually sitting in these decision-making tables and kind of bring forward how do we address the youth-related aspect when it comes to adaptation, when it comes to gender. How do we protect especially girls in loss and damage-related questions? How can we make funding more accessible when young people, innovators, have great ideas, but they are excluded from the funding mechanisms? So I think it's very important how we can mainstream the youth-related elements in these negotiations, and this cannot only be done by young people themselves, because I do truly believe in intergenerational leadership, and it's a common cause we are fighting. So how can everyone really contribute that the perspectives and voices of young people, and especially the most vulnerable and also most marginalized young people, can be included in all of these conversations and decisions, and ultimately in the implementation?
Thank you so much, Marie-Claire. Your answers are informative, thoughtful, and heartfelt, so I really appreciate learning from you. Thank you, and best of luck for the rest of COP. We are going to transition to our next speaker, already feel like we have heard so much information.
Yes.
It's amazing.
Absolutely. Our next speaker and our next guest is Namgay Chodin. She's from our Thimphu hub in Bhutan. She is a former curator. She's a climate reality leader. She also is actively breaking barriers to youth participation in decision-making as a foreign service officer, and has also equipped over 400 Bhutanese youth in climate literacy. So she is active in her community and also at these negotiations. Namgay, rumor has it you have a very special pink badge, if I'm not mistaken. Can you tell us more about what this pink badge means and give us some behind-the-scenes insight?
Hi, Natalie and Sophie. Such a pleasure to meet you over our video conference here. As you know, I am at the venue right now, and it's been a long day. Having a pink badge means that I am part of my country's party delegation, and I am actively taking part in the negotiations. It has truly been an eye-opening experience, especially for me, because this is my first time at COP and my first time in the negotiations.
Amazing. As an active member of the negotiations, when you arrived in Egypt, I'm curious, what was your mission and mandate for COP27? What are you hoping to see come out of this meeting?
I'll answer this from two perspectives. So the first would be that my mission here at the COP27 is to represent the interests of my country. I am from Bhutan, a small and least developed country in the Himalayas that contributes the least to climate change, but is not exempt from the worst impacts of it. I am also negotiating on the Article 6 track, which is on the carbon markets, and within that we are currently discussing trading carbon credits between countries, trading carbon credits with actors outside of the states, but also to have an aspect of non-market approaches to mitigation. You may have already heard that finance and money is the talk of the town. And for developing countries, there's a lot of expectations that we can establish a infrastructure and mechanism that is equitable, that encourages more finance flows into countries that need it the most. So where I am currently, there's a lot of expectations riding on the outcomes of these negotiations. So my mission here is to be a young voice here, because I feel that we are at a time where there's a lot of skepticism about the multilateral process. But when I come here and when I get to witness this for the first time, I have not lost hope. I am still very, very optimistic, and this is what I feel that including more young voices in the process brings to this entire institution that we have here, that it is injecting a lot of hope and a lot of dynamism. Now, going back a couple of steps, as a global shaper and as a climate reality, I'm also here to represent the interests of our larger community, our larger world, and I am here to ask our world leaders for more ambition and for more equity in the process.
You mentioned about more ambition and more equity. I'm curious, Namgay, when you think about the changes you'd like to see, it also means action. And I'm curious, what actions do you hope young people will also take at the meeting, but after the meeting too?
So I'm thinking about it in terms of my own lived experience here. I am the youngest negotiator on my delegation, and this is personally something that I'm very proud of. But I also believe that we really need to bring more youth voices into the international mechanisms for climate action. But also at home, I would like to talk a little bit about the Global Shapers Thimphu Hub project, the Bhutan Climate Futures Lab, that was created with the intention of bringing more youth perspectives into the policy process, because we really did notice that in the national policy discussions, a lot of youth voices were missing because of a lot of existing barriers, such as young people simply not being aware that certain policies and certain ways to address climate change at a systemic level exist. So what can young people do? I think it is crucial for young people to be ambitious themselves and to want to be in areas of decision making. I'm talking about politics, but I'm also talking about government, I'm talking about businesses. So it's important for young people to place themselves in positions and places where they have a voice to influence decisions. And it is not about consultations now, but rather about collaborations between different sectors of society, and where young people would have an important role to play there.
Thank you, Namgay, for joining us. Super helpful reflections from Namgay. Of course, we are 10,000 global shapers around the world, many of whom are joining us for this session in over 500 cities in 150 countries. And what Namgay highlights, so of course, young people can shape dialogue from boardrooms to public offices. Young people have a role to play in really advocating for concrete change and holding people accountable. But of course, our young members who are on the line, what we also heard from Namgay is that you have implementation potential. Through hub projects, through local initiatives, we can reduce emissions, we can conserve nature and biodiversity. There's so much that young people are doing around the world, particularly in the Global Shapers community. So we're joined by 3 more representatives of our community. Let's move to who's next.
Thank you so much. Up next, we have Lucy Tong from the Beijing Hub. Lucy, you are a researcher for climate change and sustainable development, and also an organizer of Global Solutions Festival, which is an annual gathering of young change makers to solve pressing global issues. Coming both from the academic perspective and also the action-oriented perspective, as I know you are a very action-oriented person, how has this COP been for you, which is also your first?
Thank you, Sophia. So, as you mentioned, this is my first COP, and I've always been excited to attend this conference because this is where, you know, actions happen at a national level, where negotiations happen. And you know, I come from a small town from Inner Mongolia, and for those of you guys who don't know, Inner Mongolia is the autonomous region north of Beijing, and it's very deserted. And my town is the town that produces iron and steel for the country. And from growing up, I've always seen air pollution being part of my childhood, and this has inspired me to become, you know, a climate change advocate. And so it's especially exciting for me to attend COP this year. And I think a few lessons I've learned during COP is, first and foremost, bring a lot of food and drinks. I've been having a lot of trouble finding these, and so jokes aside, the other thing that I really have thought about is prioritizing. So I've realized that COP27 is a magical place. Everyone who is in climate is here, all the youth, all the business leaders, the world leaders, everyone who cares about climate is in COP27. And so you really got to utilize your agenda and to see what you, to understand the topic that you're trying to you know, get into, and to really utilize your time here. And with that being said, there's also another thing that you need to be aware of, which is to be on your toes. And I've met so many business world leaders just on our way around, and you really gotta utilize that opportunity to share your voice and to tell them what youth are thinking about in climate.
Thank you so much, Lucy. And those are some very useful tips for hopefully next year when even more global shapers can go to the conference. It also sounds like you're saying be dressed to impress at all times. So well noted. Lucy, what is your call to action for shapers and for young people?
So I like to quote Gimwei from the World Economic Forum. She's the head of the Nature and Climate team in the forum, and she, during one of the panels that we had, she mentioned that how she likes to mainstream the Center for Nature and Climate in the next 5 years, so that it's in the agenda of the business leaders and of the world leaders. And I really think that global shapers and the YGLs could play a role here. I know that we have been drafting an open letter, but among the global shapers who are coming to COP27, and I do feel like there has been a trend of global world leaders caring more about the voice of youth, and so I really hope that we would be able to deliver this open letter to the people who actually makes decisions at in climate change, and and also to be able to share the impact of global shapers as well as the forum at international opportunities like these.
Thank you so much, Lucy. And that is something that we're working on together. So I appreciate you mentioning it. So I'll get to work on it right after this. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us. And a lot to think about, but we are going to move right along.
I like the balance between very specific logistical recommendations for upcoming shapers, but also lots of high-level recommendations for world leaders, business leaders too. So a big thank you to Lucy. Up next, a familiar face to Sophia and I, Alejandro. It is nice to see you again. Up next, we are joined by Alejandro Rene Dali Rivero. He is a member of our Bogota hub in Colombia. Alejandro, we just heard from Lucy about the very real, tangible, important issue of air pollution. I know you've just participated in sessions with the World Economic Forum's Alliance of Clean Air, looking at ways to tackle our health and the health of the planet. We also know, of course, you're a founding member of the Latin America Coalition for Clean Air. You also are working hard on the integration of Venezuelan migrants and refugees in Latin America through your own organization. I'm happy to see you, Alejandro. How are you doing today?
I'm doing amazing, thank you. How are you doing?
And very happy and excited to talk to you and all of the other global shapers active in Egypt. I'm very curious, mission, message. This session, of course, is called Youth Perspectives and Call to Action. What has been your message at COP27 so far? And what's your call to action?
Of course, and thanks for the question. As Lucy was mentioning, air pollution is a huge topic. I'm a forcibly displaced migrant from Venezuela that used to live in Colombia. Air pollution, like forced displacement, reminds me of how things that you don't control can directly shape your future. I was born with asthma, that it got worse due to air pollution when I moved to Bogota, and what it was not a common situation to get asthma attacks just became my daily life. And that was the trigger point to start a whole journey of over 4 years of mobilizing young people in Colombia, Latin America to tackle air pollution. And when I gathered this as a mission. I think my mission is to empower young people to discover their best version for the world. And mine was a version that could use his voice to shape public policy, but also inspire others to take action. And in this case, my goal here at COP27 is to make sure that we put health at the center of the climate agenda. Air pollution now kills 7 million people every year. And just in Colombia, every 15 minutes a person dies of diseases related to air pollution. So how can we make sure that air pollution is at the center of the COP agenda and that we're taking actions to save not the lives of our future generations, but the life of our own children and our own families that are currently affected by air pollution?
Thanks, Alejandro. You mentioned, of course, air pollution. Do you think anything else is missing from the UNFCCC agenda this year in COP? And what are the issues young people are raising to make up for this?
We're seeing a huge increase of different issues such as loss and damage. Of course, there's a debate, a giant debate around deforestation. But I think when we're talking something that is seen at COP but not really on the agenda, particularly would be air pollution, non-communicable diseases that are also increased due to the climate crisis, and a particular issue that is keen to me because of my history, that is forced displacement, climate mobility, and climate refugees, where there is a pavilion of climate mobility, but we should be seeing that as a center of the climate agenda and not just an appendix of loss and damage. How many people from small development island states, but also from Central America and South America, we're seeing huge amounts of migrants leaving even from Brazil or from Colombia and from all Central America due to the fact that they no longer have water or that they no longer can cultivate their own foods. So I think we're on a track. I will hope to say that we're on the right track, but definitely what we need here is more young people that know that you can definitely shape the future, because we're shapers and we're shaping it. And for me, the message here is, if you think that you cannot do anything to fight the air pollution of the climate crisis or the effects of the climate crisis in your own community, please, you can. You can definitely make a difference.
You can make a difference and you must make a difference. Alejandro, we are wrapping up on the first week of COP27. I'm curious, as we head into the second week, are there things you're still looking forward to or things you want to achieve in the days ahead?
I think I'm actually really excited of the different, more informal meetings we have. Everything happens so fast at COP. This is actually my first COP as well. On the weekend, we are going to have some spaces, informal gatherings to meet with other people interested in our own issues. In my case, for example, climate and health. So I'm really interested in knowing their stories because I know everyone that is at COP, or almost everyone, is here because they care. And I want to hear the stories behind them. And also, I'm really keen to know how the negotiations are going to advance and if we're going to see some real actions on loss and damage in the agenda.
Thank you, Alejandro. Thank you for joining us. Nice to see you, and we wish you luck for your activities in the week ahead. Last but not least, we have one final shaper to talk about and talk with. Sophia, who's up next?
Next, we have Camilla, and she can go by one name, kind of like Madonna, for example, or Beyonce. Camilla is our community champion, one of our wonderful community champions. She's been a member of our community since 2019. She is a bridge builder between the big players and grassroots initiatives and heavily engaged with the Amazon rainforest communities. She recently launched the Creators Academy initiative, creating innovative and strategic ways to communicate messaging about climate action and democracy. Camilla, you are also a frontline advocate, I know, for the most vulnerable communities, and as one of our esteemed community champions, I would love to know what you would propose for hubs to do to really make a difference within their region. What have you seen work so far?
Wow, thank you very much for having me. I've been seeing a lot in our communities, especially shapers. They are like doing great things through innovation. I've been seeing cross-hub collaboration. I've been seeing people like traveling across oceans to help another shapers. And I believe that our community can be an example and lead by example other communities, especially because we are highly engaged, high educated, we are super connected with the real issues that our communities, local communities are facing. And I've been shapers doing a lot of things, especially here in COP. Most shapers are some of those negotiators or specialists, and I really believe that we can like back to our communities, local communities, and share not just about the such as like humanitarian aids that global shapers are doing in Pakistan or in Amazon during the oxygen crisis last year because of COVID. So shapers are leading the way. We are changing our reality right now. So I believe and I hope that we can share more about our communities, especially here in spaces like COP, not just to be an example, but help them to find ways to help us continue making impact.
Thank you so much for that response. I actually, because this is the last question, I'm going to allow Natalie to do the honors. I believe you also had a question for Camilla.
Oh, Camilla, it is nice to see you. Thank you for joining us. Camilla, you just mentioned it's so important for young people to be conscious of the impacts of climate. And I'm curious, what are the most significant impacts of climate change that you see in Brazil? And what's your call to action as you're in COP as we close up today's session? What do you want to share with our online audience?
Okay. Brazil right now say to the whole world that we want to stop deforestation and we want to protect indigenous communities and traditional communities because they are really holding the skies above us, as a indigenous leader from Brazil said. So we must, I've been seeing like Brazil fighting against like bad policies. I've been seeing Brazil, especially the young activists, they are like telling the world what we need, but also I've been seeing like behind the scenes a lot of scientists and researchers, and especially the health workers, they are doing the real work right now. So Brazil has the special role for me at this COP, because we are responsible for taking care of the most important tropical forest. So if we are not engaged and committed to really maintain the forest stand and stop deforestation, the global community will ask us for answers. So right now, I think all the Brazilians that are here, they are committed to show the global community that we are able to stop deforestation. My final takeaways. Of course, this COP is calling the COP of implementation. So I'm here like help. I'm here like I want to see those type of implementations. I want to see really finance for loss and damage. I really want to see the proposal to mitigation and adaptation become real projects. But we don't have more time to pilot projects. We must act. We know that nature-based solutions works. We know which nature-based solutions can be scalable, so we must invest on those solutions. And I'm also hoping to see the youth voices, and especially those people from like small islands, indigenous communities being heard and also being part of the decisions to receive and use those investments.
Thank you so much, Camilla, for joining us for today's session, for the work that you do in Brazil to combat climate and to ensure that those on the front lines of this crisis are heard and part of the process as well. And of course, thank you for all the work you do to inspire and mobilize global shapers in your region and around the world. It is a pleasure to talk to you today.
The pleasure is mine. Thank you.
All right, Sophia, wow, it feels like we have traversed the globe talking to global shapers from different regions, different countries. We've heard about the effects of climate change around the world. I'm inspired by what I've heard, and I'm also just moved by the level of commitment that our members are showing to these negotiations and their work year-round.
Absolutely. We heard from Marie-Claire that young people bring the passion and the heart, and then we heard that with all of them, and I felt it.
Yeah, the passion and the heart and the expertise.
Yes.
And it was amazing to see those shapers who are active in negotiation rooms and who are really advancing the climate agenda. So congratulations to you. You work with these members year-round, and what a powerful reminder of what global shapers are doing on climate. I also want to, of course, thank our global shapers for sharing their experiences and actions. We heard from our members, of course, who are on the ground in Egypt. And this, as we heard, this conference is not about ambition raising like in Glasgow or commitment making as we saw in Paris. But this COP is really about concrete actions to address the climate crisis. And as we heard from our members, there are many solutions that exist that need to be scaled and replicated. And we heard about some of the concrete ways global shapers are doing this. I want to thank Lucy, Namge, Marie-Claire, Camilla, Wool, and Alejandro for leading climate action in your communities and on the world stage. Sophia, as we wrap up this conversation, I do want to ask you, for all of the global shapers who are watching, what should we keep in mind and what as a community should we be focused on in the days and months to come?
I think that it's essential that we acknowledge that the real life consequences of the climate crisis are felt differently by our members around the world. This past year, it manifested in deadly heat waves that scorched India and Pakistan with the highest temperatures ever recorded. Heavy rainfall attributed to climate change has spurred severe flooding and landslides that have devastated communities in South Africa and Brazil. In Pakistan, 8 weeks of torrential rain triggered devastating floods that left 1/3 of the country underwater. Off the coast of Australia, the Great Barrier Reef experienced its 6th mass bleaching event. And in my home country, the United States, a mega drought gripped the southwestern region, with 2021 seeing such extreme dryness causing devastating fires that it has now been classified as the worst drought in 1,200 years. So drought, coupled with extreme heat, also blanketed China this year, shutting down factories and impinging on hydroelectric power plants. These are just a few of the consequences of climate change, but it is essential to remember that these consequences impact our community differently, with historically marginalized communities bearing the brunt of costs and impacts. This is why it is critical for global shapers to not only address climate issues within their own communities, but for those with greater resources to find ways to support others around the world. It is in this spirit we are calling on all global shapers, all climate leaders, to declare a climate emergency, and we aim to reach 50 cities by our annual summit next summer. And for those of you who live in cities who have already declared, to work on and work together to hold your policymakers and industry leaders accountable. We are here to support you I am here to support you. Natalie is here to support you. So please get in touch and join us.
Our call to action is clear. Declare a climate emergency in your city and work with global shapers around the world for a strong and powerful movement to advance the climate agenda. It is essential, of course, for our members to understand and to also raise awareness for the real and tangible impacts of climate change on our members around the world. So thank you for that, Sophia. I do want to leave this session on a note of hope. And that, I think, is what we heard today. We have seen how youth and Indigenous-led activism has led to an increasing number of leaders across government, the private sector, and civil society who understand the urgent need to address climate change as well as the benefits of immediate action. Climate action is really now becoming mainstream across all aspects of the economy and society, from central banks and multilateral development institutions to mayors and ministers, as well as companies and local community groups. And of course, youth mobilization, the members of youth movements around the world have a lot to do with this. So we cannot stop now. We need to continue to accelerate climate action. And as we heard from Lucy, Namge, Marie-Claire, Camilla, Wool, and Alejandro, young leaders must have the information, power, and voice to shape decision-making processes. And that is one key focus of the Global Shapers community. We are grateful to the passion and activism of Global Shapers who are online as this session comes to an end, and other youth activists around the world. You give us hope for the future of our planet. Thank you for joining us today, and we hope to see you next time.